Welcome everybody to Astrology Unplugged. I'm Rick DiClemente. Excited to have our guest, Lynda Hill, with us tonight from Sydney, Australia. She is famous for working with the Sabian Symbols in astrology. We're going to do a lot here, but I want to first just give you a briefing, and then I'll be bringing her in and introducing you. The Sabian Symbols are a name of a type of knowledge that was given to a psychic named Elsie Wheeler, I guess around 1927. You can correct me, Lynda. Around 1927, she worked with the famous Mark Edmund Jones, and she was blind, and she psychically saw what each degree of the zodiac meant. And she had a 3x5 card next to her head, and on the back of the card it would say 4 Aquarius or 2 Gemini, and she came up with an image. And these became the Sabian symbols, and she'll tell you what Sabian means in a second. And they have very much become a standard through mainly this book for many, many years. And the book was translated, I guess, in the 50s and 60s by Dane Rudhyar. And since then, the football has been tossed over to Lynda, and Lynda has taken it much deeper with a book of her own, or several books of her own, and she has delved deeper into the meaning of each of the 360 degrees. So I'll be showing some of these pictures of your books in the background while you're talking, but meanwhile, let's welcome Lynda Hill from Australia. Thank you for joining us in the midst of all your fires and climate problems down there.
Yes, pretty major. Yep.
Well, we're very sorry to hear that. Lynda, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like for you to continue on with what I said, maybe describe to the public how these symbols came about, what they are, and boy, digging into the stuff you wrote, I can really tell that you've got massive amounts of intuition, and just a marvelous book you did. What are the Sabian symbols?
Well, they, excuse me, they are basically just a phrase. So a string of words together, like a dentist at work, or the pot of gold, you know, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Yes. So, yeah, and Dane Rudhyar, of course, wrote a great deal about them. But just coming back to the beginning of it, you know, it was in 1925, and Elsie Wheeler was a spiritualist medium. And in fact, on the census, she actually said that she was a spiritualist medium, which I really like. I think that's fantastic. And my glasses, excuse my glasses. Anyway, it just looks really quite askew. But anyway, so what happened was that Mark Edmund Jones wanted to do what he called the experiment. There had already been a type of degree systems that had come through before. What I mean by degree systems is that for each degree of the zodiac, there will be a phrase that will describe that degree of the zodiac. And there already were some around. But Mark Edmund Jones decided that he wanted to have a shot at doing that. So he had 360 3-inch by 5-inch white cardboard cards, and the volcanic eruption. And yes, so he'd written Aries 1, Aries 2, Aries 3, Aries 4, right through to the end of Pisces on the back of these cards. And so they were the little index cards, white ones. So he would sit there and he would shuffle those cards, and he would take one at random and put one in front of her, and she would describe that degree. Now, neither he nor she knew what sign or degree they were looking at. It was completely.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. No, they wouldn't have worked if they'd done it the other way. So it was completely random, and it wasn't Aries, Taurus, Gemini. They did not do it that way. I'd love to know it'd be fantastic to have recorded what happened. So yes, so he'd put that card in front of her. The story goes that they did it in his car, but it was in Balboa Park, and we don't know the date, because Mark Edmund Jones didn't want to reveal the date. So it's been secret. Yeah, because he knew all the astrologers would race and make a chart, for
And
that
start
moment.
arguing about it.
Probably. Anyway, so yeah, so it is said that the Sabian component of it is said to be that a Sabian from 2,000 years ago, somebody from the Sabian Brotherhood, was coming through Elsie Wheeler.
Oh,
So this happened in 1925, but what Mark Evan Jones and Elsie Wheeler agreed was that what was coming through her was the ancient mind matrix. That's actually what they called it. And these people were around 2,000 years ago, give or take a few years. And one of the people that was there was Abraham. So I find this fascinating. And I've been threatening to write a book about it for years, but I don't know whether it's me that's supposed to write it. But the fact that Abraham was with the Sabians, and the Sabians worshipped the planets out to Saturn. They built temples to the planets. The moon was their biggest deity. And they used talismans, and they were basically alchemists. So they weren't, they weren't Christians, they weren't Muslims, they were alchemists, so they were very into astrology. So it's super interesting to me that Abraham, who's been claimed by the three major religions, was actually a Sabian. So, they've all claimed him, but no one talks about the fact that you can find it online. It's not hidden, but no one really cares too much about that because, they all claim him for themselves. Anyway, so it was supposed to be, one of these ancient mind matrices that was coming through Elsie Wheeler on that day. And I just want to point out that Dane Raja worked this out some years later. He said that if they did an 8-hour day that day, they did all 360 in one day. He said if they did it in an 8-hour day, remembering that Elsie Wheeler was heavily handicapped, she couldn't walk, she could hardly use her hands, she could hardly keep her head up from rheumatoid arthritis. He obviously, he put a card in front of her, she saw a phrase, he'd write it down on the card, he'd discard that card, shuffle the cards again, take one, neither of them knowing what sign or degree they were looking at. And if they did it in an 8-hour day, which, is a reasonable amount of time to expect, then she saw a Sabian symbol every minute and a half for 8 hours. Every minute and a half.
She was a Virgo too.
Yeah, that's right. With and the Sabian symbol for her son is the bride with her veil snatched away. So it's like, the veil between the living and the dead, the veil between right and wrong, the veil between, truth and whatever. It's all, it was removed from her and she was able to see into other realms. And she also never married. So that's all, people say, well, how can she be the bride with the veil snatched away when she didn't marry? Well, not marrying was an issue in those days. It was literally an issue to not be married. So, anyway, so that's a bit of a roundabout.
For example, if I look at the 29th degree of Gemini, the phrase she came up with, which has been preserved, the phrase for that degree is the first mockingbird of spring.
Yeah.
And she has some real short descriptions, other ones a little bit longer. They're all pretty brief. And from that is when the Sabian symbol translation started. So I want to ask you, I know you said your mother was an astrologer, your father was an astrologer.
Yeah. And then Edgar Casey.
Okay, and what is it as you're going along as an astrologer? I know you're a Scorpio person, right?
I am.
What is it that propelled you and ignited the spark that you said, hey, I'm going to write a book about the Sabians?
Okay, well, I had a girlfriend. I don't see her terribly much anymore because she's moved away, but she was an amazing psychic. And at a birthday party of mine in the early 90s, she said, I'm going to do a reading for your birthday. By the way, my birthday was yesterday.
Happy birthday.
So, thank you. So 21st of November.
We're sitting here on your birthday, but you're not.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, so she said she was going to do a reading on my birthday, and she said, I'm cutting this very short. She said, oh, you're going to do something super special in astrology, and you're going to travel the world, but particularly in the United States. They're going to ask you to come back again and again. You're going to go there so many times. You're going to write books, and one's going to be huge. And she said, you're going to have the respect of your peers, and you're going to be doing something that no one else is doing. Anyway, so I was there going, right, write a book on what? Aries, Taurus, Gemini? I mean, you know, what am I going to write a book on? And then immediately after that, I was studying astrology. I was doing second and third year concurrently because I couldn't get enough of it. So I was looking at things that I hadn't even looked at. You know, I hadn't even done second year, and I was looking at them in third year. I mean, it was like, well, anyway, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to know all of it as much as I possibly could. So my teacher here in Sydney spoke about the Sabian symbols, and I was like, oh, what's that? And, you know, and that was in a class on progressions. So I love progressions, and I love the Sabian symbol. So, yeah, I realised that I had Dane Rajah's book because I got every book known to man that I could find, you know, on astrology. And so I got it out and I started looking at it and going, oh, my God. And it just blew my mind. And so then I just started to get more and more into it. Oh, by the way, I must say, 2 weeks after she gave me that reading and said I'd be doing all that, I sat in my chair in my office and I said to Huey, you know, God, my higher self, it doesn't matter who it was. I said, I want what she said. I want exactly what she said. And I didn't even know I wanted what she said. And I said, I want to be really good at something. And then straight off it was the Sabian symbols. And like I was afraid to even lecture. I'd get up in front of people and I'd cry. You know, I'd feel sick, you know. And now, straight after I asked for the ability to do those things, to lecture, to teach, to write books, I wrote a book. I started lecturing, and I've never been nervous since. It doesn't matter if I was completely unorganized. I could stand up in front of 10,000 people, and that's, I reckon, because I asked for it. I literally said, I want to be able to, you know, teach and speak in front of people, and ever since I asked for it, I just never got in the least bit nervous. So,
well, you know, I have a lot of different guests on and meet different people. And I must confess, being an astrologer, I check everybody out.
Yeah.
I check them out. This person says they have psychic ability. It's got to show up in the chart. At least it's got to show up somewhat. Well, Lynda's doesn't just show up. It's like, it's massively present and powerful. Now, I want to ask you the question, which I'm sure you've had 1,000 times, but we got to get it on this show once. Why are the Sabian symbols considered the Sabian symbols that came from Elsie Wheeler in 1925? And why aren't the Sabian symbols a list of another recurrence of such an effort done in 1955 or 1971? Why? My assumption is they could be done again today.
Oh, they can.
And they would be just as valid.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I've got a girlfriend in Florida, Alice. She's done the Fairchild symbols. She did them herself in a park in Florida. But you see, I think there was some sort of connection that was really like supercharged on that day. And there are, you know, people say to me, oh, there's so many different Sabian symbols, because they think that the Leo symbols, the Kosminski symbols, the whatever symbols, they think they're Sabian symbols. No. They're degree symbols. There's only one set of Sabian symbols, but some authors see the Sabian symbols slightly differently. Like what I did to get my compilation of Sabian symbols is that I looked at what Mark Edmund Jones wrote about them, how he wrote the symbol, how Elsie Wheeler originally saw the symbol, how Dane Rajah might have changed the symbol. And so I went through and I just cherry-picked my favourites from those three. So people will say, well, but you've written, you know, the widow at the open grave. I've got, you know, a widow kneels at an open grave, you know, fresh and soul cleansed from grief. A widow kneels at an open grave ready to receive the secret to eternal life.
Are you saying that I looked at some symbols and pretty much it was a match 1-to-1, but it looked like some of your symbols were written a little differently? This
is what I'm explaining. That's right.
That's what I thought you were saying.
So that was from Mark Edmund Jones wrote them in 1931. He wrote what's now known as the mimeographed symbols. So they are still the Sabian symbols, but what he did was he made them much longer. And some of them I love, just like the widow standing at the open grave that's ready to receive the secret to eternal life. It just feels so much better than the widow at the open grave, which is Taurus 5, and it's where Uranus has just been.
Okay, I would like to give people an example. Let's try this. You just had a birthday, which we're sitting on in the West because we're still on that date, right?
Yep.
Could you, I would imagine that the Sabian symbol for today's date or your birthday has got to be married pretty well to your solar return chart for 2020 largely. Could you read, I want them to see an example of a symbol being fleshed out. Could you take take that symbol, read what's in the book, and then expound on that, please?
Well, I don't really need to read what's in the book, but because I wrote it. But yeah, and I do have this book in my head. But it's Scorpio 29. It's my sun degree is an Indian woman pleading to the chief for the lives.
When she says 29, what she means is anything 28 or bigger, she calls 29. You round up to the next degree.
That's right. So just to explain that, the Sabian symbols start at 1, but the zodiac starts at 0, and it's always worked like that. I tried to align the Sabians with and it just didn't work. It's just you got to stick with a thing that's been done for a long time. You got to stick with it. There's a reason for it. Anyway, so when you look at your degree, your planet or your point, it doesn't matter for what reason you're looking at it. You always add 1 to that degree. But also what's really super interesting is to look at the degree before and the degree after. I find that to be super interesting. So to answer your question, the Indian woman pleading to the chief for the lives of her children. Now, when I wrote this, I didn't have these issues in my life. It's counselling, family law courts, magistrates, lawyers, divorce, guilt and innocence. I mean, I've got, this much in my keywords there. And I really saw it as the Indian woman pleading to the chief for the lives of her children. I saw it in amongst other things as a woman who was pleading for her ideas, pleading for her children, pleading to the court, in a family law court and everything like that. So what happened was I wrote in here about family law courts and, it's all that sort of stuff and protecting the younger, even though I hadn't had family law court issues myself. But what ended up happening was straight after I wrote that in the book, I ended up in a relationship where the guy had massive family law court issues, and actually we had apprehended violence orders, police coming to the house. This massive thing erupted between him and his ex-wife over the child, and it just came out of nowhere. So I'd written about this issue. I hadn't had the issue. Soon after I wrote about it, I did have the issue, and even more so is my daughter has won a major journalism award in Australia. I know she's not me, but she's my daughter, and she's won major journalism awards. She's about to win another one next week. She'll definitely win it. It's the major journalist award. And she's written a major book on domestic violence. But what she's won the awards for is for her work exposing corruption in the family law court in Australia. So all the stuff that I wrote, all those keywords have come true in my life, but not necessarily through me. My daughter and someone I was in a relationship with. So, you might say to me, well, but that's about your daughter and she doesn't even have this degree in her chart. Yeah, but I'm the Indian woman pleading to the chief for the lives of her children. And one of my children are doing this thing of the Indian woman pleading to the chief for the lives of her children. It's quite extraordinary. So anyway, that all, certainly did come true for me. And it was, with the relationship, it was just horrendous. It's affected my life in very bad ways. The 2-year relationship I had with this guy who lied continually about his ex in order to get the child, custody of the child. So, and just to use this degree again still, the degree before it, I see as being the karmic condition of a planet or a point. I made that up because so many people told me that they were looking up the wrong degree because they didn't know to add 1 to the degree. And I'd say to them, yeah, but that really fits you. Like it really fits them, And so I realized that these degrees, the ones before and the ones after they also work in the life of the person because of progressions, because of transits right before they were born. It got
Solar arcs.
installed in them. So the degree before my son is the King of the Fairies approaching his domain, and it's Scorpio 28. So it's funny, yeah, because this really speaks about approaching their domain, and I've had a domain on the internet since the late 90s. Excuse me. But as a child, we moved around. My mother got kicked from pillar to post, you know, continually. We didn't have anywhere to live that had our name on it. So the King of the Fairies approaching his domain, I never felt like I had a domain. I never felt like I never had the best friends. I never went to a school where I felt I belonged. You know, it's a bit sad. It's a bit of a violin story. But the King of the Fairies approaching his domain could be seen as me having this domain of the Sabian Symbols, you know. Like I might not have had all that safety and security when I was young, but I've got this domain that I've created, you know. I've installed this, you know, domain myself. Anyway, so that's a little bit about that.
With this huge approaching Saturn Pluto conjunction
On my ascendant,
coming in January 12th at the 24th degree of Capricorn, what do you see then?
Well, it's all going to be very interesting. And it's right on my ascendant right now. Like, I think it's to the minute Pluto's on my ascendant. So, I mean, it's just been horrendous in that measure. But, yeah, it's going to be super interesting. And I think that there's, there's a woman entering the convent.
A woman entering the convent.
Yeah, and a soldier winning 2 awards for bravery.
So how do you go from a woman entering a convent to this massive symbol of Saturn conjunct Pluto, 24 Capricorn on January 12th? How do you go into the meaning of that?
Well, I think, you know, a lot of people are really feeling disaffected and upset what's going on politically, not only in the US, but in Australia, in the UK. I mean, we're talking globally. You know, whether it's the Philippines or it's, it's just everywhere. You know, people are upset everywhere. So Pakistan, you know, just go, you know, South America, it's just going on and on and on. So, you know, the woman entering a convent, I think a lot of people are going to feel like they just don't want to look anymore. I mean, it almost came up. Pluto almost came up. The soldier winning 2 awards for bravery in combat. Oh, look, I want to just come back, and I am going to use the political situation in the US for this because it's quite stark. You know, where Pluto is right now, and it's where Pluto and Saturn have conjuncted as well. I don't think it was exact, but it was close enough. Was on the general revealing nobility of character by accepting defeat gracefully. And so we've got a lot of generals, you know, that are being talked about. You know, the word general we're seeing again and again and again in terms of American politics. But it's also where we have to go, okay, I'm just going to stop for a minute. It was interesting, I saw Bill Maher, you know, on the Bill Maher show. He said, you know, like, arguing against people on the right, you know, people arguing left and right, it's just not doing any good. We should really drop that. That's very much like the general revealing nobility of character by accepting defeat gracefully. It's where we go, look, this isn't the hill I choose to die on. I don't really want to die over this situation. I don't want to keep arguing over this, but I do think that it's important that people raise their voice. I certainly do raise my voice, and sometimes I get in trouble for it. So, but the next degree on that Pluto and Saturn are going to be on is the soldier winning 2 awards for bravery in combat, and we're seeing soldiers, we're seeing people, you know, in uniform, you know, up there testifying. Do you know what I mean? So you're actually seeing it in real life. Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting. And the woman entering the convent, which is 23 plus of Capricorn, I think that's where a lot of people are going to be just pulling back and saying, look, just really need to get into the spiritual life a bit more, you know. But, yeah, it's major. I will point out that, you know, you can really look at where Pluto's been since Trump was elected, and you can see the story. It's quite extraordinary.
And
it's
extraordinary. Eris, too.
You what?
Eris also. Eris, E-R-I-S.
Yeah, right. Oh, Eris. Yes.
She's very active now.
And, you know, it's interesting because of Trump. So I don't want to bring this all down to Trump because we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Sabian symbols. But it's interesting that so many people are talking about the Pluto return of the United States because it's a degree that talks about, I do know what it is, but I'll just look it up. It's the large aviary. So the large aviary is where America's Pluto is. If you go with the, you know, the 4th of July Sibley chart or any of those charts.
Right.
You know, any around that time they were doing the constitutions, Pluto was on that degree of the large aviary.
27 Capricorn?
That's it. So Capricorn 28 when you look it up in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you know, it's Twitter. It's Facebook, you know, the large aviary is the internet. And so it's going to be very interesting when Pluto comes back to that degree, which it will in the next couple of years. And yeah, it's almost as if there's going to be so many loud voices. It's really going to drown out what's going on. Yeah, so, yeah. What other questions you want to ask there?
Oh, I got a lot of them. Now, one thing I try to do with my students, because I find students are naturally always trying to push forward to learn. And I keep reminding them that you can learn a lot about your chart by going backward. What happened on this date? What happened 2 years ago? What happened 20 years ago? And et cetera, et cetera. I'm hung up on the power of October 8th, 1965. October 8th, 1965, which was the 60s. And and it went on about 5 years before and about 6 years afterward. And Lynda, when I read in the Sabian Symbols, I read the symbol is simply a Ouija board. At the 18th degree of Virgo, the symbol, this is where Uranus and Pluto conjuncted in October 65. The symbol was a Ouija board. And Roger largely said about that degree, it was a turning point because mankind needed to become more intuitive.
Yeah. What's your question?
What do you pick up with the significance of that degree that was the 60s, 18 Virgo?
Yes, well, I mean, it was the beginning of the women's rights movement. I know all that started in the 20s, and I know it all started before that as well. But, you know, like really in the 60s, it really, really ramped up. Do you know what I mean? The two women with the Ouija board. But it's more, you know, people were lighting incense. They were getting much more into spirituality. You know, the Maharishi was around with the Beatles, you know, even a bit earlier than that. But it doesn't matter. That was what all grew out of that period. I really actually quite like that degree. I've had some interesting experiences with that degree. That degree was around one time when I actually literally did a seance. It's not something I do a lot, but I did a seance in Tucson, and it was extraordinary. And I won't go on about the whole thing. But towards the end, I asked if there was a special message for me from Elsie Wheeler, and she said, she went to, and the thing went to U, and then it went to R, and then it went to M-A. And I'm writing it down. I wrote down, you are me. And I jumped up. I literally jumped up from the table. I was like, oh my God. It said, you are me. Yeah, it was all.
What are you mean? You are me?
Yeah, no, Elsie Wheeler.
Is that how you took it? You are me?
Well, that's what it said. You are me.
M.A. Do these people have any idea how phenomenal this is to have a woman in front of us that has a living knowledge of watching these degrees being passed over in eclipses and full moons and over and over and over and over? It's not just book learned. She's got an inherent knowledge of these degrees. Well, let me ask you this, because things are so wild right now. People are looking at astrologers. Every astrologer I know is just going like this because it's just so unbelievable, with Eris squaring Saturn and Pluto. What do you see is going on?
Well, I don't know. I guess it's just the major revolution.
I saw your daughter, by the way. I saw her speaking through Facebook over in that Australian TV show. She was very impressive.
He's everywhere.
Very political. What is going on? To me, it seems like the East is meeting the West for the first time.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like that. Look, honestly, it's very hard for me to know. I just, this is going to sound a bit like a cop-out, but I don't actually concentrate too much on the future. I know that sounds like a silly thing for an astrologer
Oh,
to
that's
say.
fine. That's fine.
You know, because it's like it's the great unknown. You know, I mean, members of my family are so freaked out about climate change. You know, even my extremely intelligent, you know, daughter, it's freaking her out, and literally keeps her awake because she's got a young child, and she's just not sure what's going to happen. You know, and half of Australia's on fire. I mean, you know, so I don't look too far into the future. Yeah, it's funny. I really don't. I'm so much more interested in the psychological thing. But, you know, I feel to say, you know, for bigger pictures, I think it's really interesting as we go into the Aquarius age, because we don't know when we're doing that. We don't know if we went into the Aquarius age in the 60s or, I mean, you know, besides which we're not just going to go into it because there's a huge cuspal period that lasts like 240 years long. It's just the cusp, you know. So we don't know when that's happening. But I do feel like we are moving into it now. But as we move out of it, it's so fascinating to look at the symbols because, excuse me, the last degree of the Pisces age is the first degree of Pisces because we're going backwards, right?
Right.
So we get out of Pisces and we go into Aquarius. So we go off the first degree of Pisces and onto the last degree of Aquarius. And so the ages move backwards, and so we'll be seeing those things. And that first degree of Pisces, that is the last degree of the Piscean age, is the large public market. And that talks about, you know, banking, markets, marketplaces, having your needs met, being able to go and buy your fruit and vegetables, you know, banking, it's, you know, credit cards, it's insurance companies, it's the stock market. So the large public market. And then when you move backwards and you go into Aquarius, that last degree of Aquarius talks about the devastation of civilization, literally. And so it's the moonlit fields that were once Babylon and now blooming white. And so the moonlit fields that were once Babylon, I don't want to put this out there and say we're about to face the end of civilization, but I think it is definitely the end of civilization as we've known it, you know, in many, many ways. But, you know, the moonlit fields that were once Babylon are blooming white. This can be salination coming up through the ground. It can be where everything is just, you know, white because there's so much drought and nothing is growing. It can also talk about the flowering of the past, but I really do see it as, you know, a real warning against the collapse of civilization. So, yeah, so that's a bit of an interesting one to look at in terms of the Aquarian age and the Piscean age. And again, you know, I mean, it's the cuspal period is so long, but I think we can see both those things happening. The moonlit fields that were once Babylon are now blooming white can also be the knowledge of the past coming through into the present, you know, or, you know, what the Mesopotamians did, you know, the creation of the circle and algebra and astrology and all this wonderful knowledge that comes up. That can be what's blooming. It's coming through.
Notice how Elsie Wheeler,
yep.
This is her chart. Notice how her moon is at the very 360th degree of the zodiac.
Yep. So I really take notice when I see this degree, because this degree can talk about what do I want to be when I grow up. You know, like I just haven't quite, you know, so it's the I do know what it is. It's the mountain, you know, that has the carving on the side, a bit like Mount Rushmore. It's a long one.
You got them all memorized.
Say again?
You got them all memorized.
I do have them all memorized. Yeah.
Rock formation resembling a face.
That's right. Yeah, he takes it as his ideal of greatness, and as he grows up, he begins to look like it. So it's like you know, growing into that thing that you really want to be. But I really like that next degree, which is the Aries 1, the first degree of the zodiac, and that's the mermaid has climbed ashore to the mermaid. A mermaid emerges from the ocean. A seal is embracing her. And so this is about finding your feet and finding your voice, you know, because mermaids don't speak. They just squeak, you know. They don't have a voice. So they have to find their voice and have to find their feet, because they don't automatically have feet either. So it's the beginning of the round. But you know what really blew me out, Rick, was when I first saw Elsie Wheeler's chart in Markham and Jones's 1953 book. the Sabian symbols in astrology, the degree of her ascendant is exact to the minute of my moon.
Wow.
Exact to the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way he had it, it was 2754, which is my moon, exact to the minute. And I was born right on the full moon. So my sun is on her descendant. So I was born right on the full moon. It's only 25 minutes out of being exact. So my moon is on her ascendant exact to the minute. My sun is on her descendant less than half a degree off her descendant. And twice I asked Elsie Wheeler for a special message. I used the Sabian Oracle, the cards that I came up with. And I asked them for a special message from Elsie, and I got the harvest moon illuminates the landscape. Well, I was born on the harvest moon, full moon, and I illuminate Elsie's landscape because my sun and my moon are exactly on her ascendant, descendant. There's a lot longer story that goes with that. But I twice in a row, a couple of months apart, I asked and I got the same answer both times. And then when that happens, it just blows your mind. I've had it where I've asked 3 times, and each time I've got the same symbol.
When I've worked intuitively, there's quite a tendency I've noticed with all people to BS yourself, to kid yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that the people who are really good intuitively, they have a built-in scale. They have a built-in yesometer where they start to BS themselves. And I noticed because I got Pluto trine to Mercury, and I'm very grateful for that. Because when I start to sense something intuitively, if it's wrong, my Pluto will say, nah, that's not it. And there's something in me that just says, that's it. That's it. Now, you must have that. You must have it in spades in order to do the work you did. How many years did you say it took you to?
It was about 12 years to write that, but and that's that's with the lulls in between. But mostly did and coming up with the quotes in the book was just enormous. I actually couldn't use my right arm for about 6 weeks. I could barely do anything because I was investigating over 3,000 quotes online to find out their copyright status, because you just can't put whatever you want in your book, and Penguin New York published my book, that's the one that John held up earlier. That's that version. And there's a whole long story about that one as well.
Let me ask you a question about that. That's very interesting. Did you find when you were going through the zodiac, I don't know what order you went through, did you find that, let's, for example, say you got to the 5th degree of Libra, for example, and all of a sudden everything stopped and it matched something in your life that was stopped for the same reason? Really?
Totally. But I totally, it's, sometimes, like I'm sitting here and my glasses are wonky. I just find it really funny because the karmic condition of my Mars is the professor looking over the top of his glasses at his students, so I've actually got it in my, in my chart, it's sort of like, but yes, I do. Yes.
No, I noticed that people can go online to sabiansymbols.com, right?
Yeah.
And they can look up these degrees. What do you suggest people do? Start with their rising sign, their sun and moon? How do you go about it?
Yeah, I used to be like that. I used to say, start with your sun, then do your moon, then do, it's just like boring as anything. I think, sometimes we might go, well, I'm really interested in my ascendant, and we might look at it and we might go, oh, I don't quite get that. Okay, I'm interested in my Venus. What's that telling me? And they might go, oh my God, look at that. And then when they work with the symbols, they get more interested in that one for the ascendant. Some people really have a problem thinking symbolically. They really do. Yeah. I'll have people say to me, you go, like, how can you not get that? I do understand, but they're too busy. Years ago, I wrote about Prince Charles. His North Node in the 10th house is the widow at the open grave. And I was writing, this is in the 90s, I was doing something on the internet on one of the forums, and I said, it was when Princess Diana died. And I said, well, he's also the widow at the open grave. He'll always be seen as being the widow at the open grave because his wife died. It's a really major, big story. But not only that, you know, his mother is, you know, probably going to live, I said this 20 years ago, is probably going to live forever and a day, because they always do, the royals. So he's waiting. He's like the widow at the open grave. Am I ever going to become king? Which he probably isn't now. So, but the widow at the open grave. So anyway, so I spoke about this on a forum, and this woman wrote back and said, no, that doesn't work. And I said, why doesn't it work? And she said, because he's a widower. He's not a widow.
Oh, please.
And you go, I could just rip my hair out right now. I'll just rip it out. You know, it's like, you know, oh dear. You know, so people do, they get stuck on it. You know, a girl's face breaking into a smile might be somebody who's had terrible dental problems their whole life. It could be somebody who smiles really super readily. It can be who's very inviting to have people come towards them. It can be somebody who walks around frowning the whole time. And so, you know, only that person really knows how that really goes in their life. I mean, I do readings on this, and I also do reading, I have for a long time, but I also don't really even want to know terribly much about that person. I just ask for a paragraph, and then I just start speaking, because the thing is that they can go, oh yeah, the girl's face breaking into a smile. I've had terrible issues with smiling, or I've always smiled, or I'm too friendly, you know, that, and they can make the value judgment around how the symbol actually works in their chart.
Also, if you folks have Solar Fire software, that's built into Solar Fire on the first pull down menu. You can go pick the Sabian symbol of the moment, ask a question like an oracle. Yeah. I think what I would like to do now, and I want to open this up to the callers. These folks are on live. Of course, many people will watch it tomorrow on replay. If you have a question for Lynda, I'd like to welcome it, but please don't ask about your particular degree of your chart. Let's keep it generic, and so we're all learning from each other, not just about a certain person's chart. So if you'd like to ask Lynda a question, please raise your hand, and I will work with you. Erica, hold on, please. And Erica, you're on with Lynda Hill.
Goodness. Hi,
Speak
Lynda.
up, speak up.
Okay, I've got these headphones on because I've had complaints about too loud a speaker, but you can hear me okay, right?
Yep.
I read that it's very helpful to look at the exact opposite sign in that same degree when you're looking at these symbols to get like a whole picture. And I know Rick was talking about that similarly recently.
With signs, yeah.
Something like that.
I do it all the time.
Yeah. What is the advantage of that?
Oh, so absolutely. So, you know, like just take, you know, Venus on the 12th degree of Scorpio, you know, 11 plus 12 of Scorpio. You can look at 12, you know, 12 of Taurus, 12 of Leo, and 12 of Aquarius. And all of those are going to cover how that Venus in Scorpio will manifest, because every time there's a square or an opposition to your planet or point, it comes from that theme. And why I brought up 12 Scorpio is because it's one of my favorite ones. It is, in fact, my Venus, but it is actually my Venus. And, you know, and of course, Mercury's on that degree right now, the embassy ball degree. And what it can be about, and I've noticed it from all the 4 points, it can be about the Cinderella story. So you're either at the ball, the embassy ball, or you're not. And so it's so fascinating. Right opposite the embassy ball is the young couple walking down the street window shopping. So this can be shopping for the prince, you know, shopping for, you know, Cinderella shopping for a husband, or, you know, the prince shopping for a, you know, a wife. But it can be like we're either walking down the street window shopping, or we're the poor cousin who's, you know, walking behind everybody else holding hands. And we might be lonely and looking through the window and going, this is not for me. I'll never have this lounge or this house or this thing. And it's the same with the Leo, and it's the same with the Aquarius side of things. It's quite extraordinary. So what it does is it really helps you to understand your planet or your point, or, excuse me, just that planet or that point, when you look at to see what's square and what's opposite. I think it's fascinating. And because I've got the symbols in my head, I find it quite easy to do. So I might, you know.
A great idea, great idea.
And you know, and it does get a bit over the top, because you've not only got that, but you've got the degrees before and the degrees after. But even with my own, I don't, every now and then I'll go, oh, that's my Mars. That's right. So, and opposite my Mars is that degree. Oh, that's right. That's what I'm learning about. You know, that's what's coming up for me. You know what I mean? Like,
another thing that shows up a lot, we have a tendency to think of the zodiac in pieces. 360 different diamonds. It's one thing. Your horoscope is one throbbing entity. Who's next with their question, please? Just raise your hand. Who's next? Did I see an Elke? Go ahead, Elke.
Hi, Lynda. I've been Facebook friends with you for a long time, so I followed you. I think I wished you happy birthday too. Anyway, so I'm so glad to see you here. It's awesome, you know, to see your friends live, right? But you were saying about the British family. You were talking about the British family all the time, and I just last night was looking at Prince Andrew's chart to see whether he's actually lying or not after this disastrous interview. What are your thoughts on that? And what are the symbols saying in terms of the British monarchy? What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I don't think I've got his chart up anymore. No, I did have it, but I noticed that he was having a transit to his, oh God, I've gone right away from everybody here. I've noticed that he's got a, oh, I'm trying to find you guys again. Am I still on?
Yeah, you're fine. You'll find a little icon at the bottom. You just put your cursor on it.
Yeah.
It will be a Zoom icon at the bottom. It'll come back to life.
Will it? Okay.
Yeah.
You can't see anymore because I went up to see if I could find the chart. Anyway, I know he's having Neptune transit to his Mercury, and it was conjunct.
That means scandal, and that means the scandal is true. That's what
yeah. And like it was just so transparent that he was lying. But I think even bigger is the fact that, you know, I find it really amusing that Queen Elizabeth's ascendant is exactly my ascendant. I think it's like 2 minutes off or something. I'm smack on her ascendant. So she's got, you know, the Pluto and the Saturn on her ascendant. And I think that that's got a lot to do with this whole thing. There you are.
Yeah. The monarchy is threatened now.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's going to be so interesting
when you
to see what
happens. All this Scorpio working since 08, and symbolic of all these things with pillars falling down. I mean, and it's already hit the Catholic Church, and it's hitting the monarchy is no surprise to me.
Well, you know, Cardinal Pell in Australia, his North Node is the boy with the censer stands near the priest at the altar, or it was his Neptune or something. But Cardinal Pell, who was the third highest person in the Vatican, an Australian, third highest person running the treasury, and he had the boy stands next to the censer. The boy with the censer stands next to the priest at the altar. He literally has it in his chart, you know. So it's just like, oh God. But you know, getting back to the royal family, I did go away from that for a minute. Excuse me. I really think it's a reflection of Queen Elizabeth's chart, what's going on. You know, you'd almost take her chart as being representative of royalty, of that royal establishment. And so she's the general revealing nobility of character by accepting defeat gracefully. And so also, she's also just had Uranus go over her sun on the first degree of Taurus.
Really?
That first degree of Taurus, I really see that as being quite often it's about eugenics. It can be about bloodlines. It's
Is that right?
Well, it's Hitler's son. It's Queen Elizabeth's son. It's it's Prince Charles's moon. It's the first degree of Taurus. It's the clear mountain stream, and it talks about clear bloodlines. It's very, very fascinating to think of that. Of course, on the other side, you know, the first degree of Taurus can be very much about people who come from everywhere to mix in with that stream. Do you know what I mean? Like blood streams from many different places. So it can be, you know, there's nothing to say it's either this or either that. And this is where I want to say also here, I think this is really super important, and I don't hear many astrologers saying this, but your chart is not going to show your consciousness. It's just not going to. Your chart doesn't know. So if I calculate your chart with no information whatsoever, then I don't know if it's the chart of an elephant or a table or a bridge being opened or a black person or a white person or a Jewish person or a Catholic or a male or a female. I have no way of knowing from the chart, because the chart is merely a moment in time, and that really needs to be taken into consideration.
When you say you're doing a chart, how do you do a chart reading for a Sabian symbol? Which degree do you pick?
I don't go straight to one. I used to do that. I used to be very formulaic, starting with the sun, then going to the moon, and then going to Mercury. And that's boring. So what I do is when I look at a chart, I might go, oh my God, this woman's got a major Pluto transit going right now to her sun. And so I might go to the sun, or I might go to the moon, or I might go to Mercury.
You go to where the action is.
It's very intuitive.
Susan has a question. That's a great answer. Thank you, Lynda. Susan, you're on with Lynda. Go ahead.
Hi, Lynda. It's probably a dumb question, but I was looking at your website and I see an e-version of your book, but then that would not have the oracle cards. Is that right?
That's right, but you can use that, of course, online. Do you know what I mean? You can use the oracle online because it's online. What? Yeah. And so, yes, it's the cards have been the bane of my life. The bane.
Really?
Yeah. Because, I haven't had a lot of money to package them properly. And if people, if the book's packaged, they couldn't see into the book. It was actually Elizabeth Avedon, Richard Avedon, the very famous photographer from New York, photographed everybody in the entire world. Well, his his daughter-in-law, Elizabeth Avedon, married his son. She came up with the thing where I have the cards in the back of the book. So you actually tear out the cards in the back of the book. But yes, for the ebook, you don't get the cards. But I've had the oracle online since the late 90s.
Okay.
What's in the near future for Lynda Hill?
I'm not exactly sure. My life has sort of crashed a bit the last few years with Pluto and my ascendant. It's been a very strange time. I put a lot of time and effort into my daughter writing her book. 2.5 years. I ran over to Bondi, which is an hour from where I live, to help her write this book, which is now a bestseller. It only came out in June. It's a bestseller. She's, doing all sorts of. But what I've done is I've neglected.
What's the name of that?
See What You Made Me Do.
See What You Made Me Do.
See What You Made Me Do, yeah. Like the police, the judiciary, the judges, magistrates are all buying multiple copies of this book. It's quite extraordinary. She's really changing the face of the conversation around domestic abuse. And so when you come back to my son there, being on the Indian woman pleading to the chief for the lives of her children, that's very much my daughter living that out, you know what I mean? And yet she hasn't got that particular degree in her chart. It's just so funny how that happens. So, I don't know what's coming up for me, to be honest. I'm just taking one day at a time at the moment. I'm really not sure where I'm going to go. What I'd like to do, but I will need some type of help because I'm not great with the I'm not great with the technicalities of it all. I'd like to actually speak all the symbols from Aries 1 to Pisces 30. I'd like to describe them by my voice and have the files. I reckon it'd be great. You could just go, well,
Great idea.
It's very cumbersome in terms of size. And also I know what I'm like. I'm likely to go, I want to add this to this. So I'm going to need to be able to access that file to put more stuff in there. Okay. You know what I mean? Like it's not as simple as it sounds. It's somebody said, why don't you do YouTube videos? Oh my God, 360 YouTube videos.
I don't think so. So what did you mean, Lynda, when you said that the Sabian symbols were given to us by Elsie and other people, and they're Sabian, and other people have given us different meanings of the degrees. You differentiated.
Well, they're just totally separate. They're not the same. They're not the same experiment at all. And I do think that they work. I've looked up a number of them, and sometimes I've gone, "Oh my God, how accurate's that?" But I haven't found they don't talk to me like the Sabians do. So the other degree systems are not Sabians. There's only the Sabian symbols. A lot of people say that. They say, "Oh, there's many different, degree, systems of Sabian symbols." No, there's several.
So overall, what were the Sabians trying to say as a people?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Well, I guess it's magic. It's high magic to me. And, you know, I have to say, I want to tell you what the degree of the moon is while we're doing this too. I thought this is really fantastic. The degree of the moon as we're doing this is the ancient scroll. I don't know what it is. After I've been talking about an hour, I get tired and my brain goes off. It's the ancient scroll reveals, no. It's the beginning of the supergalactic center. A man is gaining secret knowledge from an ancient scroll he is reading. And so this is what I want to tell you quickly. I just want to tell you, this is the magic that can happen with the Sabian symbols. I have chosen the horse of Uffington, which is on my cards and it's on my book. It's a horse. It's a horse that's it's carved out of the hillside in England. It's almost 360 feet long, which I found amazing. It's carved out of the chalk. And it's over 3,500 years old. So they carved this hill figure in England out of chalk. And when I was 16, I saw a photo of it and I went, that's my logo. I didn't know what I was even going to use it for, but I just decided that that was my picture. And so in the 90s, you know, having used the logo for several years, I'm in England. A friend lends me her brand new BMW convertible, so that was good. So I was driving around. Where the Horse of Uffington is, and I went to the local museum, which is for the Horse of Uffington. And on the wall was this scroll, and it was an announcement of a market day up from 250 years ago. I actually found the chart the other day. I've got it sitting here somewhere. Anyway, I cast the chart. Anyway, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was in the museum and I saw this scroll on the wall, and it was this announcement of this market day. So what they did when they came out of the hills on market day, they used to come and they used to cut back some of the turf from around the horse. I think they call it scrying it or screeing it or something. Anyway, and they would have sack races and tobacco smoking contests. I think that's hysterical. And all sorts of things like that. So anyway, so here was the announcement of a market day. And I thought, oh, I'm going to buy that. You know, it was 25 pence or something, you know. So I bought this cardboard scroll and I took it back to my friend's place. And I calculated the chart because I had a time, a date, and a place of this market day on the scroll. And so I cast the chart, and I'm literally, it looked exactly like a scroll. So I'm holding onto the scroll with one hand, and I'm looking at the thing, and I go, oh my God. So the moon in the chart of this 250 years ago thing was a man is gaining secret knowledge from an ancient scroll he is reading. One of the readings of that is a man is gaining secret knowledge from an ancient scroll he is holding. He is holding. So I'm sitting there holding an ancient scroll. You know, it was just, you know, a bit of cardboard that they made up, you know. So I was in the chart. Do you get what I mean? I was in a chart that I cast from 250 years ago. Yeah. I could see myself in that chart. I was the man holding the scroll. Or the woman. We don't care about the gender. The gender doesn't matter.
Well, Lynda, I have absolutely no idea where your daughter got her imagination from. Do you? let me ask you a question as we near our close here.
Yeah.
The folks here, in different ways, almost every single folk here, they're working with their intuition.
Yep.
They're working with it. And you are a master of intuition, if I may say so. What advice do you have for them, even though they all may want to go in 50 different intuitive directions? What advice do you have for the normal person who wants to follow their intuition?
Well, it's interesting because you actually went like that, and that's exactly how I would describe it. Because what we have to do, especially if we're looking at the symbols, but looking at the symbols in a chart, like looking at your moon, your Venus, you know, looking at a square, it doesn't matter what it is, it's all symbols. But what we've got to do is we've really got to bring our perspective out like that, which I'm sure all these people have done already. But, you know, we've really got to do this. You know, people will say, how can that be the dentist at work? You know, I think it's very funny, you know, on Halloween each year, the sun is on the dentist at work. Well, it's actually the day after. It's the day after Halloween, the sun is on the dentist at work. So all the kids eat all these lollies, you know, and then it's the dentist at work. But But, you know, like, you know, and they might say, I'm not a dentist. And you go, yeah, but do you fix things? Yeah, I fix things. And do you come up with good solutions to things? Yes, I come up with good. Well, then you're the dentist at work. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like they
being it too rigid.
yeah, they gotta do this. And you know, it's like the story of the widow and the widower. It's like, yeah, all right, he's a widower. Oh my God, shoot me now. You know? It's like, that's ridiculous. Because we are a bit of a television audience. I'm sure that your lovely people here aren't, you know, television audience people, but you know, they really want it all described. So the way I wrote my book, I really think what I've done with my book is I've brought a Uranian perspective to it. And you asked me about this before we started, Rick, so I'll finish with this too. It's just that, you see, Dane Raja wrote in a very Neptunian way. His book is very Neptunian. It's very Piscean. That's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I think it's the most amazing thing. But the thing is that if you're going to look at Hitler's chart in there, it can be really hard to find that negative, you know, because it's so Neptunian. And Mark Edmund Jones's writing style is very Saturnian. He didn't use the grammar was just full stops and capital letters. He didn't use colons and exclamation marks and you know, and commas. He just didn't. His grammar is so Saturnian. And when you read his symbols, you tend to find yourself going, what the hell does he mean by that? It's just like, what? You know, again, his book is like the Bible of the Sabian Symbols. So don't get me wrong. I think it's the most amazing volume of work.
Which regular book are you referring to?
The one you talk about, the Astrological Mandala. Yeah. That's his book on the symbols, you know. I mean, he included them in, you know, the Astrology of Personality in 1936, but it was only a chapter. The Sabian Symbols and Astrology. Mark Edmund Jones wrote a book, and it was published the year I was born. And so what's really interesting, I find, is that in 1953, when Mark Edmund Jones's book was published, The Sabian Symbols in Astrology, Saturn and Neptune were conjunct. When Dane Raja's book in 1973 was published, Saturn and Neptune were opposite each other. And it's really Saturn and it's very Neptune. You know, it's really, look, honestly, this whole thing's been very, you know, and Dane Raja's got a very strong Neptune, and Mark Edmund Jones got a very strong Saturn. And so you can really see this. And so I was born with Saturn and Neptune conjunct myself.
That's a very difficult combination to interpret.
I know, yeah. Well, it's, you know, it's very generational as well, of course.
Yeah.
But my theme is that I wrote it in a more Uranian way. I want everyday Joes, just anybody to be able to read my book and say, I get what this symbol is saying. You know, but also that's why I put what does this symbol say to you at the bottom of every page,
right.
Because people will have their own ideas that are just as valid as anybody's ideas about the symbol. You know, as long as you're not right off on a tangent, you know, it's yeah.
I want to show. Go ahead. I want to show a sample of one of your pages. Hold on, please.
These things are so complicated, aren't they? I haven't quite mastered the whole.
It does get very complicated.